The grand ballroom shimmered with gold and glass, its towering pillars of crystal refracting the light from 1,000 chandeliers. It was the pinnacle of opulence, the very heart of a galaxy's elite. And at the center of it all stood Valeria Xantaris, the richest, most powerful woman in the Orion sector. Tonight, she would host the most anticipated auction of the year, where artifacts from the mysterious and dangerous planet Earth would be sold to the highest bidder. In a far corner, far removed from the glamour, a girl stood unnoticed. Dirt smeared her cheeks, and her clothes hung in tatters. She was a human, barely 20, standing awkwardly in the presence of beings who saw her as nothing more than a curiosity. To the alien elite, humans were relics of a forgotten war, reduced to scavengers and survivors, barely worth acknowledging. But Valeria Xantaris did notice her, just not for the reason anyone might have expected. "Why is that filth here?" Valeria's voice rang out, icy and cutting, her piercing green eyes locked onto the human girl, narrowing in disgust. "Who allowed this thing into my presence? Does she think she can stand among beings of status? Someone get her out of my sight!" The crowd laughed, a harsh, jeering sound that echoed off the crystal walls. The human girl, whose name was Astra, flinched, but she did not move. There was fire in her eyes as she stood tall, despite her humiliation. A ripple of defiance surged through her veins, though she knew that speaking up now would only make things worse. But what Valeria Xantaris didn't know, what no one knew, was that Astra wasn't just some random human girl. She was Valeria's long-lost daughter, stolen from her as an infant and left to grow up on Earth's ruins after humanity's fall. And tonight, Astra had come for answers. 20 years before, during the height of the intergalactic war between the United Galactic Federation and the human resistance, Valeria Xantaris had been pregnant. Despite her status as an elite in the Federation, she had fallen in love with a human soldier, an act considered treasonous. Their affair had been brief but intense, and from it, Astra had been born. But the Federation had crushed humanity, and the baby girl had been kidnapped by those who believed Valeria's child could never be allowed to exist. Valeria had searched for years, using all her resources to find her daughter, but the war ended in humanity's defeat. Earth was razed, its survivors scattered across the galaxy. Heartbroken and embittered, Valeria became colder, her wealth and power filling the void where her child once lived in her heart. But Astra had survived. Raised in the shadow of Earth's destruction, she had been hidden away by a group of human refugees. She grew up hearing stories of her parents, of how her mother had been a powerful alien who abandoned her, leaving her to suffer alone. Determined to find the truth, Astra had scrounged and clawed her way through the ruins of her world, eventually learning of Valeria Xantaris' identity. And so, Astra had come to this glittering auction, desperate for answers. But Valeria's cruelty had stung deeper than she could have imagined. As the guards moved toward her, Astra squared her shoulders. Her heart raced, but she refused to leave quietly. "You think I'm filth?" she spat, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "You have no idea who I am." Valeria raised an eyebrow, her expression one of sheer disdain. "I don't care who you are. You're nothing, just another lost human in a galaxy that has no use for your kind anymore." Astra clenched her fists. "I am your daughter." The room fell silent. For a moment, the air seemed to freeze, and Valeria's face paled. You're lying," Valeria hissed, but there was a tremor in her voice. "My daughter is dead. She died along with the rest of your worthless species." Astra stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "You may have forgotten me, but I remember you. I've spent my whole life trying to find you, to find out why you left me behind." The crowd whispered in shock. Valeria's eyes widened as memories she had long buried came flooding back, of a child stolen in the night, of a husband killed by her own people. She had thought it impossible, but there was something about the girl's eyes, those same defiant green eyes. Without thinking, Valeria motioned for the guards to stop. She took a step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "Prove it," she whispered. Astra held her gaze, her voice steady. "I have a scar on my left wrist, a mark from the night they took me. You gave it to me when you tried to protect me." Valeria's breath caught in her throat. She remembered that night vividly. In her desperate attempt to save her child, she had cut herself, leaving a small but deep scar on the baby's wrist. It was a mark no one else could have known about. "Show me." Valeria demanded, her voice faltering. Astra pulled back her sleeve, revealing the small, faded scar. Valeria's knees nearly buckled as she stared at it. She staggered forward, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch Astra's arm. You're really her," Valeria whispered. "You're my daughter." But before she could say another word, a violent explosion rocked the ballroom, sending shards of glass and crystal raining down. The room erupted into chaos as armed mercenaries stormed in, guns blazing. They were after one thing, Astra. Astra grabbed Valeria, pulling her down behind a pillar as the mercenaries opened fire. "They've been tracking me," Astra explained quickly, her voice strained with panic. "They know who I am. They want to use me as leverage against you." Valeria's heart raced. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about her wealth, her status, or her reputation. She was thinking about her daughter. "We have to get out of here," she said, grabbing Astra's hand. But the mercenaries were relentless. They were part of a shadowy faction that had been hunting Astra ever since she started asking questions about her identity. Valeria's power was unmatched in the business world, but she had made enemies, dangerous ones, who now saw Astra as a valuable pawn. Together, mother and daughter fought their way through the chaos, using Valeria's knowledge of the palace and Astra's street-owned survival instincts. They ducked through hidden passages and evaded the mercenaries' traps, but it wasn't enough. The mercenaries cornered them in the grand hall, weapons raised. Astra stood in front of her mother, ready to die for the woman who had once abandoned her. But Valeria wasn't going to let that happen. In a stunning display of bravery and resourcefulness, Valeria used her alien abilities, powers she had hidden from the world for decades. She unleashed a force so powerful it knocked the mercenaries off their feet, sending them sprawling. "Never again," Valeria whispered, her voice cold and fierce. "No one will ever take you from me again." Astra looked at her mother in awe. For the first time, she saw the woman not as the cruel, cold-hearted business mogul she had heard about, but as a mother who had suffered unimaginable loss. But the danger wasn't over yet. As they fled to Valeria's private ship, the mercenaries regrouped. They would not stop until they had Astra in their grasp. The final chase was heart-pounding, filled with narrow escapes and high-stakes action. In the end, it was Astra's quick thinking that saved them. Using the knowledge she had gained from her years of survival on Earth, she sabotaged the mercenaries' ships, leading them into a deadly asteroid field where they were destroyed. As the ship soared into the safety of deep space, Astra and Valeria sat in silence. The tension between them had shifted, now filled with unspoken questions and unresolved pain. Finally, Valeria turned to her daughter. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said softly, "but I need you to know that I never stopped looking for you. Not for a single day." Astra's heart ached with the weight of her mother's words. "I spent my whole life hating you," she admitted, her voice shaking. "But now, I don't know what to feel." Valeria reached out, placing a hand on Astra's. "Then let's figure it out together." In that moment, the galaxy's richest woman and the poor human girl she had once humiliated were no longer enemies. They were mother and daughter, ready to face whatever challenges the universe had in store for them, together. And so, the story of Valeria Xantaris and her long-lost daughter Astra didn't end with wealth or power, but with something far more valuable, the bond of family, forged through hardship and reclaimed in the stars.